Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Create Your Best Chapter podcast. My name is Vera Ilnitsky, and I work with women solopreneurs, helping them increase their impact and their income with confidence. And if you want to learn a bit more about me and my services, please visit my website at createyourbestchapter.com. And I'm so glad that you're here today on my podcast. I talk to really amazing people who are also entrepreneurs and who are creating positive impact in the world and really amazing change. And I think it's really important to have these conversations because it inspires us, it motivates us, it encourages us. It also reminds us that we're not alone on our journey, in our struggles, in our challenges, and in our dreams. And I think that that's really, really important. And today on the show, I'm really excited to have my friend Sara Stepa on today. Now, a little bit about Sara. Sara has a passion for bridging the gaps and reducing barriers so leaders and organizations can create extraordinary impact. With over 10 years experience in the nonprofit sector, she brings a wealth of specialized expertise in grant writing and nonprofit strategy, and she supports leaders with a spiritual twist. By integrating human design into her coaching, leaders discover their unique leadership style that uses their energy and strengths in a way that is most effective for themselves, their team, and their organization. Sara is also the author of a best-selling book called Choosing Fulfillment is Scary AF. Get unstuck and change the life you have into the life you want. And you can purchase that on Amazon, and I'll have the link in the show notes for you to do that. So Sara, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Vera. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, well, we have talked a lot about, creating new chapters in our life and following our hearts and doing the challenging things. And I think your book actually speaks a lot to that. But I'm wondering if you can, describe a key event in your life where you really had to make a decision to open up a new chapter for yourself.
Honestly, I feel like my whole life is full of new chapters. I just get settled and then something else changes, or I think I have, the right path and then I have to pivot. And part of that is my personality. And then part of that is just lifing. But I think a key one that was really pivotal, where the choice really changed the trajectory of my life, or where I really started a really, really fresh chapter, I'd say almost a new book, was when I chose to quit my job during the pandemic. And that's the story that's really outlined in my book. But that was a really pivotal moment that was really necessary, but really, really difficult at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think it was necessary for you to do that, even though it was really challenging?
There was it's once you know something is no longer aligned for you, you can't unknow. And that's what I really started to lean into, is paying attention to, how I was feeling. And I could have masked it with pushing through, or, I had a lot of anxiety at the time. And a lot of people maybe it was during the pandemic. So they're like, Sara, maybe you're just overwhelmed. Maybe you just need some mental health support. And I did. But there was also something deeper that I was like, no, this isn't just something that's the current circumstance or whatnot. It was something deeper for me that I knew wasn't going to be fixed through meds or breath work or pushing through. And it was just this bit of a knowing that I just wasn't where I was supposed to be anymore. But making the choice to do something different was challenging. But just having that little voice of Sara, this isn't where you're supposed to be, it just didn't go away, and it wasn't quiet. And all the physical manifestations in my life were really telling me, Sara, you're not going to do well, or you're not going to survive here much longer. You're just going to decline continuously. So something's got to give. Something's got to change.
Did you resist that voice for a while?
I don't think I heard it. I often describe it as a whisper. Mm-hmm. And I was working with a coach at the time, and I actually went to her because I wanted to write my book. Totally different book that I ended up writing, which is usually how that works. And we didn't talk about the book for 4 months. There was so much other stuff going on that I needed to dissect and go through. And there was, I think, this underlying voice of, you're going to do something different. You're going to step into something new. I just didn't know what that was or what that looked like. And I had it made. The job that I was in, it was great. It was stable. I was at the director level. I had a great salary. Like job security was prime, like pandemic, unemployment rates were pretty high. Like this was not the time to be uprooting my life or completely changing the trajectory. But it was necessary. I needed to do that.
So tell me a little bit about how you tuned into that voice, because I agree with you. And I often say that it's a whisper as well. Like I use that language too, because our intuition is very quiet with, relative to the other things that are going on in our life, like the louder external noises. So how did you tune into that and actually listen to that whisper?
At that time, so I'll preface this with how I listen to my inner voice now is much different than how I would have listened to it then. This was very much at like the beginning of my growth journey, and who I was then and who I am now, drastically different versions of myself. But at that time, I didn't know how to, but like I said, I was working with a mentor, game changer. Everybody should have a mentor of some kind because truly they make all the difference. And she just really encouraged me to journal what I was feeling, journal what I was going through. And at the time, it just really helped me work through some of the emotions that were coming up versus having to have the answer or listen to the whisper. It was just like, what are you feeling? What does this mean? What are the stories? And I had to really navigate that element before I could actually even hear the whispering. But all the physical manifestations were there. The anxiety, I wasn't sleeping, like having breakdowns in the streets of Calgary. Like it was a wild time. And I had to start to do something because I was just like, this is not going to be my life. But I didn't know how to do that at the time. So yeah, journaling just helped me reframe what that looked like. And now over time, I've gone through many pivotal moments where I've had to start a new chapter or make a difficult choice. And usually my indicators or my intuition, they start in my body. They start in my feelings, and I don't always listen, but I'm learning to listen more. And so being able to tune in throughout the last few years, I've been able to pick up what that intuition says or what that whisper is. But I do think very much in the beginning, it is so quiet because we've ignored it for so long. And we listen to the outside world more because that's what we're taught. That's how we're validated. That's what we grow up with. Those are the voices that matter, not our own. And it takes intention to shift that and to start listening to our intuition. And it can stay a whisper for a while because it's a new muscle. It's a new thing that we have to learn and build up so we can make those choices, make the decisions to pivot or do the thing or write the book or quit the job or whatever it is.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing that because I think you're right. The external world is so loud, and it's the societal programming, the conditioning that we have from people that, raised us, and not from a bad, they're not raising us from a bad intention. It's just, we do listen to that external world, and we need to initially because we don't know any better when we're growing up, right? But we kind of continue on with that. And so it is breaking through that clutter and getting quiet and still. And I love that you journaled to help you explore what you were going through and what you were feeling. Are you still doing journaling? And is that still a tool that you use quite often?
I don't use it as much as I used to. I probably should. Right now, I'm kind of going through my own little pivot, and I think it would help me just make sense of some of the thoughts, because if I can't organize my thoughts, I get a little swirly. That's usually how I describe it. I'm like, I'm feeling a little spirally or swirly right now. And it really helps me organize what's in my head or just get it out of my head. So it's really great practice. I think I also started, I'd say, like using walking as more of my processing. And if you ever see me walking on the street, I'm probably talking to myself and I probably look like a crazy person, but that's like that's my inner dialogue or my like outward journaling, where sometimes it just helps me move and process because my body's moving and my brain is focused on something else rather than trying to make sense of it all. Or I'll do voice memoing as well. So I'm not too focused on making sense of sentences, or like my brain's going faster than my hand can write. And so that's also helped me articulate what I'm trying to work out, or aha moments come through where I'm like, oh, ding, 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 things start to connect and whatnot. So I'd say just like that inner dialogue in an outward expression has been my go-to, whether that's journaling, voice memos or sort of that walking, talking to myself exercise.
Yes, that's awesome. I love it. It's also why coaches are so important, right? That you mentioned, because you're articulating it in that safe space and someone else is listening to you and they're maybe hearing something that you haven't heard yourself or that you're not hearing, or maybe you're not willing to hear. And they're pointing that out to you. So I think that's a really powerful practice.
Yeah. Well, and they're able to be more objective because they're not invested emotionally. And when we're so wrapped up in our own lives and our own feelings, it can be hard to sift through stuff objectively because we're feeling the feels with our life is life and we're in that state, and having someone to come in and just like have that holistic view or be able to bring a new perspective because they're not in it every day. It sometimes honestly just gives me space to exhale, where I'm like, oh, okay, I'm not as swirly because they take me out of my head a little bit. So it's really, I actually don't have a current one-to-one mentor, and I'm really, really missing that in my life right now. So it's been a very big support for me over the years.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me a little bit about the doubt and the fear that comes up when you're making a big change. Like, how did you overcome that? Because I don't think those ever go away, but how did you actually deal with that and just go through the fear and the doubt towards making a change?
So really with doubt, the biggest, I guess, like story that comes up, I often find, at least for myself, is that feeling of imposter syndrome. I'm definitely in the thick of it right now. And really what I've learned is that, again, it's shifting the perspective of what that doubt is telling me and why it's showing up. And usually that level of doubt is trying to keep me safe or trying to keep me where challenges and or my life is consistent or what's known. Like we don't like change, so we'll veer away from it. But that imposter syndrome is actually trying to keep me safe, but it's because I'm trying to shift into or often level up into a new identity, and being able to focus on this is just a friction point allows me to see doubt from a different vantage point instead of saying, oh, I'm not good enough. I don't actually have the skills. I don't actually know these things. This is just a friction point, and being able to almost step back and see it as what it is instead of becoming my doubt. That really helps me navigate. That is not an easy skill to learn though, because the feels are still there. I still feel it in my body, but I kind of have to step back, like zoom out of me, out of my brain, out of my body to say, I am not this doubt, and be able to separate who I am from the thought or the emotion instead of becoming that emotion. So it's really flipping that.
Yeah, I love that. That's a really powerful reframe. And I agree, it's not an easy thing to do, but I think it's what keeps so many people stuck. And you probably see that a lot in your work, where the fear, the doubt, the imposter syndrome, however it shows up in your life, just keeps you where you are. And then all of a sudden, a year later or a decade later, you're still there. And I think that's the heartbreaking piece of it, because we all have this desire, we all have a light that we're meant to shine. We're all meant to have this purpose in life. And if we're not following that, then that's a real detriment to yourself and to the world. And so I think reframing that doubt and that fear is it's such a much needed skill that we need to learn. And I think we need to learn that the feeling is still going to be there and it's okay. Like, it's just a feeling. And we can decide we're still going to do the thing, even though I feel scared or doubtful, and nothing really bad is going to happen if we move forward, right?
Yeah. And sometimes it's working out, okay, what is the worst case scenario? What could actually happen? And then finding a way to either be okay with the worst case scenario happening. And you're like, oh, well, if that happened, I'm still going to be okay. And usually if we can get there, because we make things so much bigger than they really are. It's like, oh, I'm going to start a podcast. It's like, hey, what's the worst thing that could happen? No one listens. Great. You're still completely fine. Like you might have like took some time. You didn't lose anything in that process, but you put yourself out there and you have everything to gain. You really had nothing to lose. And so for me, sometimes reframing that, okay, what's the worst case scenario? And then I'm like, oh, it's actually not as bad as I'm feeling it is in my body. And I'm like, I'm going to be totally fine, even if it doesn't work out, but it always does in whatever way it needs to.
Right.
that time. It always works out the way it's supposed to. And you
Mm-hmm.
don't always feel that in the moment, but hindsight, I can tell you it always works out the way it's supposed to.
Yeah. Well, and if nothing else, you learn something. And I think that's the reframe. It's like, okay, well, okay, the worst case scenario is nobody listens or whatever. I'm not going to end up homeless, living under a bridge. Like, it's our brain likes to take us to that kind of worst case scenario, but that's not going to happen. We're going to be okay, and we're going to learn something. And I think that's the reframe. It's like, okay, well, what am I going to take away from this? How did I grow as a person? Right? Or did I meet somebody new? Did I learn a new skill? How can I use this down the road? Like, it always does work out. And I think having that hope makes it easier when the next challenge comes up. You're like, okay, I know that, and I have this hope and I have this belief and this trust that it's all going to be okay. And it helps you move forward through that challenge, right?
Always. Trust is huge.
Yeah.
Huge.
Yeah.
Especially when you're making any changes or new chapters. It's just trusting.
Yeah. So how do you do that? Like, how do you trust? Like, do you have a spiritual practice or a belief in something higher, higher power that helps you keep in that belief and that trust?
I definitely believe in like universe, source, like a higher power that is there, not necessarily orchestrating it all, but they are working to support me. And so I am co-creating with them. And so there's a level of surrender that there's only so much I can control. And in the space, sort of the in between, that's where the trust really comes in, where it's like, I've done all I can do. And sometimes it's like, well, it's not working fast enough. It's not working out the way I thought it would. And it's like, well, things don't flip overnight. You've likely been living the same habits, the same patterns, the same like thought process, beliefs for years, if not decades. And then we start to have a new awareness. And we're like, oh, well, that's going to change in 6 weeks. No, it's not. Like, you're not going to change in 6 weeks. The universe can't orchestrate that quickly. There's a lot of sort of energy that needs to shift and sort of remanifest. I'm big into like the energy side and spiritual side of how things kind of work. And so the trust or that patience really comes in with believing that things have to shift outside of me after I've shifted internally. And how long that takes usually is a reflection of my trust and how much I've been willing to look inside to really see what's going on. And so it's not just trust in everything's going to work out, but it's like, are you actually dealing with what's coming up for you? Because your outer world is a reflection of your inner world. And I'll turn to universe. I'll be like, what do I need to do? Or I have a couple of newsletters I'm on, and the messages land whenever they need to land. I do the oracle cards and things like that, where I'm just like, I don't know what to do. And then I get the cards. I'm like, oh, well, that makes total sense. And it's just like, again, it's that exhale of these little messages that remind me that I'm not alone and that everything's going to be okay.
And I think it's releasing the expectations or releasing the how we think it's going to happen, because we can't control the how. We can control what we do. We can control, like you said, the inner world. We can control our own personal development and growth. We can control our actions and our belief systems and our mindset. But sometimes I know for me, I'm like, I want it to happen in this time frame, in this way, through this way, which gets me into this tunnel sometimes. And when that happens, you could be missing out opportunities that are popping up that the universe is showing you, right? Don't walk by those opportunities.
Go this way. And you're like, no, that's not the path.
Right.
Like,
right.
yes, it is.
Right.
There's a reason there's all these other blocks over here.
Yeah. So it's about being aware, like, okay, I've done the work. I am doing the work, and I trust the process. I trust that God's going to show me the way. And I need to be aware of the people, the opportunities, the ideas, that email, that oracle card, all the things, and lean into it and not control that.
Exactly. I think that's a big thing, is that level of surrender to the outcome, because like you just said, we want it to be a certain timeline, look a certain way. And it's just like, that's the level of control we don't have. And I see this with my clients often. We often work on goal setting, and there's always timelines. We're taught that goals have timelines or you don't achieve them. And I really don't like to put time too heavily on the table for this reason, because we don't know what else is going to happen in that time frame. life might happen. You might get sick. You might have an injury. Maybe, something happens with your kids. We don't know what's going to happen. And we always overestimate what we can do. And then we feel like crap when we don't achieve what we want to. So it's really this expectation setting, both with what you're trying to achieve or where you want to get to, as well as that level of surrender that it might not look exactly how you thought initially. Like the book that I wrote is a perfect example. I wanted to write a book on like all the travels that I had done, all the lessons I had learned. I was like, this is going to be a great book. Yeah, I started it, got maybe 3 chapters in, and then total pivot. The book that actually came out of me and then went out into the world was not what I expected to be. But I still wrote the book, which was the first goal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. So what has been your biggest lesson on this journey that you've been on so far, with all the challenges and the pivots and the new chapters? What's been your biggest lesson?
What has been my biggest lesson? I think knowing myself has been, I don't know if it's a lesson, but it's maybe been the greatest gift. And knowing that I'm just not a person that stays in the same lane necessarily. And so I'm continuously starting new chapters. And for probably the last 4 to 5 years, I've felt a little bit of frustration of like, why can't things just simplify or level out? But then I look back and I'm constantly creating, but that's my personality. If people are, familiar with human design, that's my design. I'm a manifesting generator. And so for me to have this consistency, I'm not really built that way. So for me, it's embracing that I'm going to be in constant flux and constant change and constantly in new chapters or evolving chapters of my life, and getting to a place where I can accept change or feel safe and grounded amidst change is probably the biggest lesson. And I'm still learning it. Because I constantly change things up. And I'm like, Sarah, why are you doing this? I actually got a message from the universe in one of my newsletters this morning that it said, just stop. No, seriously, just stop, for like a month. And I was like, oh, message received. And so sometimes I have to remind myself to slow down and to just let things play out. And so there's a number of different lessons there. So it's, my personality, as well as just let things, figure themselves out sometimes.
Yeah. Well, on that note, what are you planning for this year? What are some of your big goals or plans that you can share with us?
The non-professional plans, or I really want to bring some more travel back into my life, since I left my job and the pandemic, and the time and freedom weren't always there. And so this year I'm just like, let's get back to the travel, because that's something that really fuels my soul. So I have 2 trips on the docket already. And then on the career side, professional side, I'll let you guys in on a little secret. I have a rebrand coming for my business, a shiny new website, and I will also be launching my own podcast before the end of the year, hopefully by the summer. But again, I don't attach too many timelines because I don't know what life is going to bring me in the next little while. But it's a pretty exciting year for my business and the direction I want to take things. And I really felt like I really received my purpose. Really solidified my direction of where I want to go, which has allowed me to really commit to some of these professional goals and some of the vision that I have for this year and beyond.
That's awesome. Who are you serving? Like, who do you feel called to serve in your business?
I am wildly passionate about the nonprofit sector. I've tried to play in other areas. I'm like, I serve this and I serve that. But that's really where I get really jazzed up and really excited, because I just think that the work being done in that sector is so vital and so important. And it does not get the level of recognition that it deserves. And the leaders in that space, they're so innovative and they do so much with so little. I just wish that they had the support to to really support their needs in addition to what they're trying to create in the world, because they're trying to bring really incredible things to communities and shape the world into being a better place. And they need people in their corner cheering them on. So that's really where I get all fired up and excited.
Well, I love it. And I acknowledge you for the work that you do. That's really important work. And you're right. Those organizations do amazing work. We need more people that are passionate about the not-for-profit sector, because, obviously it's changing the world, and for you to support the leaders in those organizations is truly powerful. So I acknowledge you for that. And I know you're going to be like wildly successful with that. And I can't wait to see a new brand and your new podcast as well. So exciting, exciting times ahead. What would you like to finish off with? Like, what kind of advice and words of wisdom would you like to share with other women who are either going through a major change or contemplating making a major change? What would you like to tell them?
I would say that the decision-making period, or what I call the in-between, is the hardest. So that like whisper, that intuition that says something's got to change. I don't want to be here anymore. You wake up, I don't want my life to look like this, to actually getting to the other side. That in between liminal space is the hardest space, because you have 1 foot in your old life and 1 foot in your new life. And the quicker you can collapse time on that period, the sooner you're going to get to where you really want to be. But it's the scariest time. That's where mentorship comes in. That's where outside support comes in. And that's where you really lean into trusting yourself. So if anything, spend the time to trust yourself and build that, because that's what's going to help you navigate shifting directions or starting new chapters 100%.
Oh, that's amazing advice. Thank you so much. Really, really appreciate that. And Sara, I really appreciate you being on this podcast, on my show, and sharing your wisdom and your story and your journey. I wish you a wonderful rest of the year. And of course, we're going to stay connected. So I look forward to, seeing everything you're going to accomplish this year.
Thank you, Vera. I'm very happy to be here. And if anybody wants to stay connected, they can find me on LinkedIn, Sara Stepa. Or if you want the more human side, you can find me on Instagram @_Sara Stepa as well. Pretty easy to find me, but it's a fun space. I show up in different personalities on different sites. So,
well, that's awesome. And I'll send those links out on the show notes as well, so everyone can connect with Sara, say hi to her. She'd love to connect with you. So again, thank you everyone for being here, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.
Bye.